All right, everyone. This part of the module for today, I'm gonna go back over C sharp, okay? And that gets back over concepts that were talked about in 327 and 427, which were basic programming concepts, okay? So you're gonna hear me a lot of time kind of talk about Unity or C sharp in relationship to P5, which is really based on JavaScript, okay? So what you have to understand is C sharp allows for programming to be added to a project. Okay. This allows you to have variables or things, values that you can store and later manipulate. It allows you to have if statements, which allow you to evaluate things and make decisions. It has functions, which allow you to do things like add something, subtract something, all of that kind of stuff. What I kind of want to discuss is it's like, well, um, there's a lot, when we had P5 or JavaScript, we had things like variables. Like I can say, let health equals 5. This is a declaration of a variable. In this case, this variable is called health, and I gave it a value. It's equal to 5. Okay. A function did something. So, in P5, it's like we had the create canvas function. That's a function. What does it do? It creates a canvas. Okay. Sometimes those functions had what we had referred to as arguments. Arguments were information that you would give to the function so it can do its job. So for instance, in P5, if you said create canvas 400, 400, that was giving it the width and the height in pixel amount of that particular function, of what size to build the canvas. When you had the background function, which would set a background color, the argument that it would take is the color you want it to be, like red or blue or gray. Okay. We also had event handlers. Event handlers were something that the computer or the program would wait for and then do code based on when that event happened. So for instance, if the user presses a key on their keyboard, something might happen. Or if the user clicks their mouse, something might happen. Or, maybe the user connects to the internet or, turns their phone from landscape to, or, portrait to landscape or something like that. These are all different events that could happen. And we can write code that corresponds to when that event happens. So in P5, we had function mouse click, which means when the user clicks on the canvas, and then I could write a function, I could have it perform some sort of list of tasks. Okay. The way I like to think about the difference between Unity or C sharp and JavaScript is kind of like the difference between languages. Okay. And what I mean by that is like, let's take two languages like English and French. Okay. Both, I mean, obviously the languages are different, but they have similar components. Okay. And so, for instance, in English, we have a pronoun I, you, they. We have verbs to eat, to walk, to code, to do whatever. Okay. We have nouns like park, school. Okay. We have the same thing in French. Obviously, they're spelled differently. And then, depending on the language, maybe the pronoun comes, after the verb or before the verb, or there's rules, they're not exactly the same language and the rules are slightly different, but they still have those similar components. And if you were to look at a lot of languages, you would find that a lot of languages have these similar components: pronouns, verbs, adverbs, nouns, that kind of stuff, adjectives, right? And that's kind of how I like to look at programming. When we talk about programming, it's like, well, there's certain concepts of programming. Things like storing a value that is a variable. Things like if statements, logical statements, if this, else this. Events, even objects. I know with my classes, I talked about the concept of an object. Okay. So I kind of want to go over these concepts real quick. First, I'll do it in P5, and then in the next video, we'll do it in C sharp, just to show you how it's done. But the concepts are similar. Okay, so when we were in P5, I'm just going to use the default P5 editor, we could create a variable. A variable is essentially a container. Okay. In my one of these days, I'll patent it, but it's my patented, like, I have a container. Okay. It's a cup, or think of it as like an empty box. Okay. And I can put anything I want in this. Okay. I could put, liquid or a toy or whatever it is I want, right? And that's kind of what a variable is. A variable is a container that holds a value, like a number or a word, or even like a logical idea, like true or false. Okay. So in JavaScript, the way it works is, all right, so if I in P5 or JavaScript was setting up a variable, it would look something like this, like I'm just going to make up a variable, name equal. So once again, imagine I had this, and I don't have a post-it note at the moment, but imagine I did, and I wrote the word name on this. So at the moment, it's just an empty variable. But what I'm going to do, in fact, if I even try to call the name of or the value of it using this, and I hit play, it should say undefined because I have no value for this yet. So how do we set a value? Well, in mathematics, we would say, x is equal to 2 or something like that, right? Well, we can do the same thing here. If name is equal to Joe student, okay? So I have a variable. In this case, it has a value of text, or is what we would call it a string. So if you remember, hopefully you were taught this in 327 and 427, we have different type of variables. Okay, we have numbers. Numbers are whole numbers, like 1 or 3.5 or 1062 or, something like that. Basically, the way I kind of describe it is if you can do math with it, that's a number. No, if you can divide it by 2 and it makes logical sense, or you can times it by 5 and it makes logical sense, that's a number. Uh, a string is a collection of letters and characters, so like a name or, a location or something like that. A sentence is, a collection of is a string. Even something that doesn't seem like a string that's made up of numbers, like, let's say I was doing a phone number. So it's like 415-555-5555. Um, you know, the way it is here, even though this is made of numbers, it's actually a string because it's not a number like it's not 415 million. Instead, it's just like this identifier. This is a particular phone number. So that would actually technically be a string. We even talked about the idea of a Boolean, which is like that's a logical totalitarian truth. Something is true or it's false. Those are the only two options. So for instance, name can equal Joe student. I don't know. Let's say we were talking about interest rates. Interest rate equals, 1.5 or something. Or, what if I wanted a variable, this is a game. Let's say I want to have a variable that represents, does the player have the magic wand? Let magic wand, if they have it, true. If they don't have it, false. Okay. So that's setting up variables. Um, we could evaluate something that is an if statement. So for instance, let's say I wanted to know if the interest rate is bigger than 1. Okay. I could do an if statement here, and I could say, okay, if interest rate is larger than 1, do the following, right? So what's going on here is this is what we have call in math a variable substitution. We're taking this value and putting it here. And essentially now we have, is 1.5 larger than 1? In this case, this is going to evaluate to true because 1.5 is bigger than 1. So what's going to happen is it's going to run whatever is here. And I could just put something like, number is greater than 1. And if I were to run this, this runs. If for some reason interest rate was, say, 0.75, once again, we do variable substitution. This value substitutes into here. Is 0.75 greater than 1? The answer is false. So then this doesn't run. So if I were to run this, it shouldn't run at all. Okay. We can even set up an else. An else says what to do in case this doesn't happen. So for instance, I can say, okay, if X, if interest rate is greater than 1, do this. But if interest rate isn't greater than 1, else do the following, which in this case could be, I'm just going to write number is less than 1. Okay. Technically, I guess it's less than or equal to. And if I do this, number is less than 1. All right, remember also that we have functions. Functions in programming do a task, okay? That task might be building a canvas like this, or setting a background color, or maybe it's rounding a number or something like that. So for instance, this is a function right here. Functions are usually denoted as the name of the function and then parentheses. Inside of those parentheses are usually what we refer to as arguments. Hopefully you remember from your 327, 427 that arguments are additional information added or given to a function to do its job. So for instance, here, create canvas is the function. What does it do? Well, it creates a canvas. This is the width, and this is the height arguments, okay? There's also a background function. What does it do? Sets a background color. The value or the argument is right here is the color, which is defaultly setting to gray. But if I wanted to set it to say pink, I could do that. And you can see you can set that. All right. You can even write your own functions. I'm going to write a function myself by writing the term function and giving it a function name like my awesome function. And then you just decide, what does the function do? I don't know. In this case, my function, all it's going to do is print something to the console. Like this function is awesome. Couple exclamation points. All right. I'm going to hit play. And nothing happens yet because I haven't, even though I wrote a function in my code, none of that is happening here. Or I haven't called the function, but I could do that. So for instance, I could come in here in my setup and say function. Oops, sorry. I could say my awesome function. And if I run that and I rerun my code, this function is awesome, misspelled. Now it's spelled correctly. Okay. All right. So, in P5, we had, pre-built functions. And in fact, if you went to the P5 reference, these were all functions, or most of these are functions that you can take advantage of, like building a circle, building a rectangle. There are ones about, rounding numbers or choosing random numbers. Here's one about loading fonts. Here's the math-based one. So it's like, you could do, where's round? Round would round to the nearest whole number. There's all these various things, right? And that's kind of what we're going to be doing also in Unity, where Unity actually has a bunch of pre-built functions that we can take advantage of. That's going to make our lives a little bit easier. Last thing, hopefully this is all kind of a refresher, is the concept of an event handler, okay? An event handler means while the program is running, like, here's my program, it does this. If I were to click my mouse, or, if I were to do some sort of action, like, for instance, click my keyboard or maybe move my mouse, or maybe click my mouse, or it doesn't even have to be the user interaction. It could be something like maybe my program is checking to see whether we're connected to the internet, or something like that. The event is an action that's been programmed into the language, and then it can check for that. Okay. And if it happens to happen, like I click my mouse or I click my keyboard, you can then run code, whatever code you want, to do something. Okay. So maybe in this case, I'm going to make I'm going to have an event handler called mouse press. Okay. What this does is it waits for me to press my mouse. So what's going to happen? I don't know. How about we take this interest rate variable and I say interest rate. That's how I spelled it right. Yeah. Interest rate equals interest rate interest. Oh, I can't hit S. Rate plus 1, let's just say. I'm going to print out that value to the console. Okay. So I'm going to hit play. And notice that nothing happened yet, but then when I click my mouse, then it's giving me that value. Okay. So these are some of the basic ideas of, programming things like variables, holding values like a string or a number or a Boolean. It could be, concepts of if statements, logical statements, evaluate a value of something. Events, something happens, the user clicks their mouse, they hit a key on their keyboard, they touch something with their virtual, controller, whatever. Function, what does the function do? I don't know, whatever the function says it does. So these are all concepts. Now you guys have done this in P5, but we're going to talk about how does that relate to C# and how does that relate to Unity? And that's what we'll go over in the next video.